Since today is the feast of St. Mark, the Evangelist, I thought the topic of evangelization would be a very fitting one for tonight. Now, the dictionary definition of evangelization is the practice of relaying information about a particular set of belief to others with the intention of conversion. That's way too academic. In the case of Christianity, it's simply the spreading of the good news of the gospel of our Lord Jesus Christ. The spreading of the good news of the gospel of our Lord Jesus Christ. Now, most of us are quite evangelical in other areas of our lives. How many are rabid sports fans? They'll talk about sports with anyone and everyone. They'll talk about sports with the willing and the unwilling. Some are evangelical about their kids, or more likely their grandkids. They can't wait to show you a photo or tell you a story about their latest achievement, escapade, or event, just to demonstrate how wonderful their kids or grandkids are. The point in these examples is that they demonstrate a certain kind of integrity, a correspondence between what a person professes and how they act. And integrity is incredibly important when it comes to evangelization. Here's another example. Years ago, through a set of circumstances that's not important to the topic tonight, I became the unwilling owner of an old pickup truck. A casual glance at this truck would indicate that the former owner was a huge, and I mean huge, Steeler fan. And so he was. It was impossible to view the truck from any conceivable angle, inside or out, without seeing a Steelers logo, a Steelers slogan, or a list of Steelers accomplishments in some form or fashion. The former owner had integrity in this regard, however much he was lacking in sound judgment. Now, it'd be easy to misinterpret my point and conclude that what I'm saying is that we need to talk about our faith to the willing and the unwilling, that we need to plaster our cars with bumper stickers. Then we would be demonstrating integrity with regard to evangelization. No, that's not necessarily true. It wouldn't be something I'd discourage as far as it goes, but really these examples are only intended to show how excited we are to discuss things like our favorite sports team, our kids or grandkids, and consider why we act differently when asked, "Why are you a Catholic?" Or, "How has being a Christian changed your life?" Or whether anyone would be able to even tell you're Catholic. That's why integrity is so important. Because as St. Paul said, we are to be ready in season and out of season to share our faith. And St. Peter wrote that every Christian should always be ready to give an explanation to anyone for the reason for your hope. But to do so, St. Peter continues, with gentleness and reverence. The importance of integrity is also illustrated by a story a priest named Father Larry Richards tells about himself. Now, Father Richards is a priest from a diocese in Erie, Pennsylvania, who I've never met, but from his books and tapes I can tell you that I have a great deal of respect for him. And he tells the story of a woman who wrote a letter to him that started off by quoting Matthew 23:3 and following, which reads, quote, "Therefore, do and observe all things whatsoever they tell you, but do not follow their example, for they preach, but they do not practice." You can see where this letter is going. She continues this letter to Father Richards. She said, "Father Richards, your words had a profound effect on me. They hit me right between the eyes. So much so that I wanted to learn more about my faith, about being holy, about being a saint. But as time went on, I began to become confused because I saw that your words said one thing and you yourself did another. That made it hard to accept your words because your life doesn't reflect them. The letter continued on for 11 more pages. Wow. Now, I don't know exactly what she was referring to, but given what I know about Father Richards, it wasn't some kind of sleazy scandal. The more likely type of failings that the woman observed in Father Richards were ones that I and perhaps you experience as well. I preach about overcoming unjust anger, and yet I become angry unjustly. I preach about always striving to be holy, yet I often grow weary and seem to fail more often than I succeed, and so on. The point is, we all fall short in this regard, but this cannot be the reason we fail to evangelize. Because part of evangelization is letting people see us sincerely struggle to live out what we believe. Living out an authentic humility is a huge part of our faith. To fall, and yet to get back up again. That can be the most effective witness we have, the refusal to give up, the determination to finish the race. St. Mark, whose feast is today, displayed this kind of witness, this kind of determination to finish the race. Unfortunately, though, we don't know a whole lot for certain with regard to St. Mark. We know that he wrote the gospel bearing his name. We know he was evangelized by St. Peter himself, whom he accompanied to Rome as his secretary. St. Peter affectionately called Mark my son in one of his letters. St. Mark later went to Egypt and founded the Church of Alexandria. As bishop, he set up the first Christian school. One day, Mark was seized by the pagans in the city and dragged with ropes over stones and was thrown into prison. The next day, the same torture was repeated. And after seeing a vision of angels and the voice of Jesus, St. Mark died. Jesus uses two metaphors to describe what is expected of us as his disciples with regard to evangelization. We're likened unto the salt of the earth and the light of the world. And each metaphor is to call us to personal sanctification, to call us to holiness and to evangelization. The benefit from salt comes from its use, which is another way of saying salt does not exist for its own sake. When used, salt brings out flavor. Salt preserves from corruption. It purifies. It even has medicinal properties. But apart from salt coming into contact with something else, it's useless. So too with you and I. You and I may attend Mass daily, go to confession weekly, and say the rosary, but if we don't put our holiness into action, we're not using the graces God gave us as he intended. You see, Catholicism is not a me and Jesus faith. It's evangelistic. It's missionary. It's the good news meant to be shared, meant to foster a community of faith and to bring others into that community of faith. And just as salt is useless unless it comes into contact with something, our faith must come into contact with our daily lives, in the workplace, in the grocery store, out on the soccer field. People we meet need to notice something different about us, need to see our light shining, if you will. not so that we can become puffed up and receive the praise of men. Jesus says in another part of the gospel that if we do good deeds to receive praise, we've received our reward. Rather, our light must shine so that they will recognize our good deeds and give praise to God. That is why we have been given the grace and privilege of being Catholic, so that we might be a witness of Christ's love through our deeds and so draw all God's children into his church. Because we are Catholic, every one of us is an evangelist.